It feels like everyone is talking about testing now. Microbiome tests, allergy tests, intolerance tests, saliva tests, hair tests, and blood tests. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against testing at all. I've even made videos about some of these tests myself because in the right context, they absolutely can be useful. But while people spend a lot of money trying to understand what's happening inside their dog's gut, our dogs are already giving us daily updates for free in the form of poo. Not the glamorous health report in the world, admittedly, but your dog's stool can tell you an incredible amount about their digestion, food tolerance, gut health, stress, inflammation, and sometimes even early signs that something deeper might be going on. And what I find strange is that most owners only really look at poo when it becomes obviously bad, when there is diarrhea, blood, mucus, or something else that makes you think, well, that definitely doesn't look right. But changes in stool quality often happen long before bigger symptoms appear. Maybe the stool slowly becomes softer, maybe it becomes unnaturally large. Maybe your dog starts going more often or the color changes. Maybe you suddenly notice mucus or undigested food. As unpleasant as it may be, having a quick glance at the poo before you quickly stuff it in the poo bag might be quite useful. Because stool is essentially the end result of everything happening in the digestive system. How food was broken down, how nutrients were absorbed, how quickly things moved through the gut, even how stressed your dog was that day. And one of the easiest way to actually assess stool properly is something called the 4 C's: color, consistency, contents, and coating. If you understand these 4 things, you can learn a surprising amount about what might be happening inside your dog's digestive system. So let's start with the first C, color. Brown is generally what we expect to see, although the exact shade can vary quite a bit depending on the diet. Dogs eating darker proteins like beef, lamb, or duck often produce darker stools, while chicken, turkey, or white fish might create lighter poos. Fresh food can also produce very different looking stools compared to ultra-processed diets, and that doesn't automatically mean something is wrong, but there are still colors that deserve attention. Black, tarry stools can sometimes indicate digested blood from higher up in the gastrointestinal tract. Bright red blood usually points lower down, often from the colon or rectum, and might happen with inflammation, colitis, straining, or anal gland irritation. Grey, greasy-looking stools can suggest poor fat digestion and might sometimes be associated with conditions like exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, where the pancreas doesn't produce enough digestive enzymes. Yellow or orange stools might sometimes reflect rapid transit through the gut, food intolerances, bile issues, or liver and gallbladder problems. Green stools can happen after eating grass or spirulina, but persistent green stools should be monitored. And white, chalky stools are especially common in raw-fed dogs eating too much bone or struggling to tolerate the bone content in the diet properly. Which brings us nicely to the second C, consistency. And honestly, this is probably the one most owners focus on already. Ideally, a healthy stool should be well formed, easy to pick up, moist but not sloppy, and hold its shape without turning into dust or flopping like a toothpaste. Essentially, somewhere between firm sausage and slightly soft log. And there are actual stool scoring systems for this. You might have heard of the Bristol stool chart, which is the 1 to 7 scale originally developed for humans and later adapted for animals, or the Thompson stool score, which uses a 1 to 10 system where lower numbers are watery and unformed and higher numbers represent firm, well-shaped stools. But why would you even use tools like that? Well, because words like soft or normal are surprisingly subjective. One person's slightly soft could be another person's, call the vet immediately. So, going back, very hard, dry, crumbly stools can suggest constipation, dehydration, too little fiber, or too much bone in the diet. A firm but softer stool might point toward mild digestive irritation, food sensitivity, stress, parasites, or a diet that simply doesn't suit that individual dog particularly well. Soft, unformed stools suggest more significant digestive upset, and watery diarrhea, especially if repeated or accompanied by vomiting, lethargy, blood, or pain, should always be taken seriously. One interesting thing to point out here is that stress can affect stool quality quite a lot. The gut and nervous system are closely connected, which is why some dogs produce completely normal stools at home, then suddenly develop loose stools during walks, stressful situations, or excitement. That doesn't always mean disease, but if it becomes a consistent pattern, it's useful information. The third C is contents. And this one gets overlooked all the time. But what's inside the stool can sometimes matter just as much as the stool itself. Undigested food can suggest food moving too quickly through the gut or poor digestion. Large amounts of grass might simply reflect grazing behavior, although persistent grass eating can sometimes indicate nausea or digestive discomfort. Visible fat or greasy residue might point toward maldigestion. Worms or worm segments obviously deserve attention. Some undigested plant matter is completely normal, especially things like carrots or grass fibers. Dogs don't digest plant fiber perfectly, so it's best to feed veggies lightly cooked or steamed and blended. But regularly seeing obvious undigested food, especially meat or fat, is something worth paying attention to. And finally, the fourth C, coating. This refers to what's covering the stool. A shiny mucus coating can suggest irritation or inflammation in the large intestine. A small amount occasionally is not unusual because the colon naturally produces mucus, but repeated mucus-covered stools are worth monitoring. Fresh blood coating the outside of the stool often points toward inflammation or irritation lower down in the bowel. And greasy coatings might suggest issues with fat digestion or absorption. Now, another thing that stool can tell us is how digestible your dog's diet actually is. Dogs eating highly processed diets often produce much larger stools because more of the food passes through unused. Fresh food diets often produce smaller stools because more nutrients are absorbed and less waste is created. And this is why I think stool quality deserves far more attention than it gets. Because the gut isn't just responsible for digestion, it plays a huge role in immune function, inflammation, metabolism, and nutrient absorption. A large percentage of immune activity is associated with the gut, so when the digestive system is unhappy, the effects don't necessarily stay limited to the bowel itself. That doesn't mean every soft stool is a crisis, but it does mean that patterns matter. So instead of only reacting when things become severe, I think it's far more useful to learn what's normal for your dog and notice when that changes. So pay attention to the 4 C's: color, consistency, contents, and coating, because your dog might actually be telling you quite a lot every single day. Thanks for watching.